Dragon's Dogma is one of the more underrated franchises by Capcom. The first game was somewhat challenging. It wasn't the type of game to hold your hand. With a limited fast travel system that made for some tense adventures and unique combat mechanics like being able to climb on larger enemies to attack weak points, the game wasn't only more challenging compared to the other ARPGs at the time, but also had this depth and complexity to it. Even fully understanding the story wasn't something that was handed to players on a silver platter. Despite all of these things, the game didn't really enjoy the same kind of mainstream success as its contemporaries. Of course, many of those who have played this game will find it hard to deny that there was something special about it, especially in its combat, which is why Dragon's Dogma has gained a cult following over the past decade. Well, after 12 long years of waiting, Capcom finally doubles down by creating a sequel. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an impressive sequel, however, we'll tell you now that it still suffers from a few setbacks that can't be ignored. So let's get started on this Game 8 review to see what it did well, what it didn't do well, and see if it's worth buying in the end. Just like the first game, a fierce battle ensues with the appearance of the dragon, where it chooses you to be the Arisen, binding you to its very being by eating your own heart. This sets a stage for a grand adventure to slay the dragon in order to take your heart back, while being embroiled in a monarchical power struggle as the Kingdom of Vermund has a fake Arisen as a king. On the other side of the world, the Kingdom of Batal believes the Arisen to be the cause of the recent calamities, but you'll need to join forces with the Empire to defeat the mutual draconic threat. Other than the main questline, the side quests will have you interacting with the world and the people around you, where the result is entirely up to you. They also serve as an advanced tutorial, teaching you different ways to approach encounters. Like, instead of attacking a boss head-on, you can instead use the nearby ballistas to deal massive damage from afar. There's a lot to experience in this world, so it's a good thing that it wastes no time in letting you actually play the game. You'll be starting off Dragon's Dogma 2 with an amazingly in-depth character creator. You have full control over your character's body, from height, weight, musculature, posture, how they walk, and many more. One could argue that the amount of things you could alter and change is quite overkill, as you quite literally have a slider for almost everything. But unlike other games in the genre, some of these options actually affect your gameplay overall. Being taller makes you run slower, but also increases your carrying capacity, and vice versa if you decide to make yourself shorter. While the game doesn't offer a lot of races to play, having only two with Beastren and Human, the game more than makes up for it with its extensive character customization. The combat is still as heavy and unique as the first game, which is defined by the ability to climb massive monsters and grab most objects like people, huge stones, and even other monsters. The combat scenarios are always risky in the game, as fights with even a common goblin can prove fatal if you don't execute the proper targets immediately. You gotta make sure that you find the enemy's weak points, strike fast, and hit hard. The game offers a variety of classes known as vocations, each having their own specific uses. The fighter being the defensive specialist with perfect parries and knockback potential using a shield, the thief being the agile and sneaky one, able to easily climb onto bodies of monsters and hit their weak points. Archers specialize in dealing range damage with a bow and arrow, and mages and sorcerers being your typical magic support and artillery respectively. There are even other vocations you can unlock later on, like the warrior and mystic spearhead. But its combat depth doesn't end there. Things like terrain elevation can also be used to knock an enemy off balance. Overall, everything great about the first game's combat is still here and better than ever before. It also helps that the game's main focal point is its ability to keep the player's attention on interesting points in the map repetitively, regardless of how long you've already been walking. Its director, Hideaki Itsuno, pointed out that players want a means of transportation of long distance via horseback, not because they want to ride a horse, but because they feel bored on the road. Although you do travel great distances across the game world, it doesn't mean that you have nothing to do. Traveling, especially at night, is terrifying, and you'd always want to stick to the roads most of the time, as straying from the path could mean encountering a deadly enemy out of nowhere. There are so many enemies and bosses you can encounter that the game forces you to plan out your travels. Because of this, you start to appreciate the downtime that the game gives you. Similar to Souls games, there's this sense of relief when finding a potential campsite during the night. It's hard to get bored walking around, as you'll always discover something to look at, explore, or defeat in your travels. which is a definite improvement from the first game as far as exploration is concerned. It also helps that pawns in the game have more interesting dialogue, depending on their inclination and specialization. Speaking of which, so Dragon's Dogma also features a unique companion system called pawns. The pawn system of the game is what makes Dragon's Dogma 2 a semi-multiplayer co-op game, as your created pawns get enlisted by other players to support them on their journey and vice versa. Given that they're controlled via AI, you can steer them to a preferential way of supporting you by their inclination and specialization. Some pawns focus on killing the biggest target, while others may be more inclined on supporting by way of providing buffs and healing. The more other players enlist your pawn, the more rift crystals you get, which means getting better companions to fill out your party. While, yes, there are in-game microtransactions that allow you to purchase rift crystals, it's not something you really need to spend for, as you can get by just by playing the game. So it's recommended that players upgrade their pawn by purchasing new equipment and skills, as this will benefit you in the long run. The gigantic open world comes with different environments of caves, deserts, forests, and cities to explore. This is highlighted by the game's amazing visuals, which is a testament to the RE engine's power to create photorealistic environments and characters. And by extent, the character and area designs are also amazing. It succeeds in convincing you that this is a living fantasy world with how everything looks, from the bustling capitals, monster lairs, and even small villages. Itsuno has already mentioned that the previous game was only part of the overall vision, as hardware and technological limitations prevented the fruition of the ultimate fantasy RPG. With the current level of technology and upgrades that we have now, they were finally able to make that vision come to life. It also helps that this game doesn't have a lot of loading screens. However, as pretty as this game may be, the biggest offender is the game's performance. Much of our experience with Dragon's Dogma 2 was with the PlayStation 5, and we found that there was a noticeable drop of FPS during combat. It's not a massive drop off to make it unplayable, but you will occasionally be reminded that this isn't exactly the most optimized game out there. There were reports of the PC version of the game having its fair share of optimization issues. Audio-wise, it is simply superb. There's nothing much to say other than it elevates the fantasy RPG experience to a whole new level. The sound effects are weighty and perfect, and the voice acting is also varied and fits the setting quite well. The dynamic music hits just right, especially when it plays its trademark fanfare when you gain the advantage in big fights, like when you get the boss down to its last health bar. Dragon's Dogma 2 could be this year's ultimate RPG experience and a strong contender for Game of the Year. It's a game that justifies its $70 price tag with a whole world to explore, monsters to fight, and NPCs to interact with. However, this also comes with a gigantic warning that this game is a lot more stable on consoles and very demanding when it comes to PC. Still, there's no denying that this game should be the standard that open world RPGs should strive for in terms of delivering a whole package. And for that, we're giving Dragon's Dogma 2 a 9.6 out of 10. But what about you? What did you think about this long-awaited sequel? Let us know in the comments below. Again, this has been GameMate, signing off.